started commuting like many years ago, just as a means to get to work.
Yeah.
And I was riding just a regular town bike, and I started riding home with a friend of mine who had a proper road bike, and he was always faster than me. So I was a little frustrated by that, so I went out and bought a road bike, and I started to get a bit faster, and then I joined a cycling group and joined a club, and I started racing, and it just kind of grew from there, just by virtue of commuting every day.
Awesome, awesome.
My best friend was actually the one who convinced me to go and try the track at the velodrome. I was always too scared.
Yeah.
And there was a come and try day, and we went down together, and I never stopped. She went once and I never stopped, and it just kind of went from there. I think sport and my personal career development are so closely aligned. There's so many synergies between the two. It kind of grew together. So.
Yeah, excellent. And so tell me about breaking world records.
Oh, yeah, that was a big day. So that was in Los Angeles in 2017 in the team sprint. As a sprinter, we train for hours every week, you know, and we'll spend, 16, 20 hours a week in order to go and race for something that's 20 seconds, so to get a result from that hard work was incredible. And it's not just me, there's a support crew that goes behind every athlete to achieve something like that. My coach and my physio. I'm getting old now, so my physio's got a big job. My teammate, there's so many people involved, and it's overwhelming. And my initial response that evening, because we had the qualifier in the morning and then the final was in the evening for that race. It was the team sprint, and my initial response was gratitude. I wasn't even off the track, so it wasn't elation of look what I've done. It was gratitude. Watching my coach on the sideline, she was just beside herself. I get emotional talking about it, and it's really special. Yeah, it means a lot.
Awesome. And what was it that you won?
It was the team sprint, which is on the velodrome. It's a standing start, two-person race, and it's 2 laps, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's 2 laps really fast. So I'm the starter, so my job is to, from a dead stop, 1 full lap, and then I swing up. So my job is to effectively get my teammate up to speed as quickly as possible and get out of the way as quickly as possible. And it's quite technical. It's that from the dead start to full speed is a challenge. That's the hard part.
That's so symbolic of project management,
isn't it? Isn't it? Yeah, it is. Yeah, lead the way.
Lead the way and then get out of the way.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the approach to project management that you take?
Well, when you put it like that, I guess it really is, isn't it? I don't. In my professional career, it's more about removing obstacles, because if I could do everything, then I would be doing everything. But your team members are there for a reason. So I see myself in project management. It's more of a facilitation. You guide the ship, you get it started, you get it up and running. But yeah, exactly, get out of the way.
Yeah.
So the SKA from a professional viewpoint is certainly once in a lifetime opportunity. I've been involved with the SKA now since the early 2000s, which is unusual, I guess, given in the industry we've only been talking about it sort of more broadly for the last 4 or 5 years. I've been involved with that program since we started the down select process for which country was going to host the SKA, and I was involved in producing the bid for Australia to become the final host. With CSIRO, I can't take it, but we helped them pull that together is a mammoth job.
Because it's a collaboration between a lot of different
That's right.
organisations, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So CSIRO obviously is as the research Commonwealth agency, but there's so many groups involved. Curtin University has a huge involvement as well in the development of the antenna technology, which is fantastic. But the efforts of multiple countries collaborating and multiple agencies, research agencies, educators from all around the world it's really unique. And not since I think the Large Hadron Collider has there been something of this scale where you're having multiple governments engage with each other and pull together something like this.
Yeah, that's incredible in itself that everyone is collaborating on one project.
Yeah.
How do you pull something like that together?
It's not just, I can assure you it's not just me. There's many. The project's broken down into multiple elements, and my involvement is with the Australian infrastructure, but there's the equivalent for the central processing facility, for example, or there's one for the antennas for low, and also the other half of the program's in South Africa. So, for example, for the infrastructure element, there's an Infrastructure Australia element and an Infrastructure South Africa element. And each of these elements has its own structure for their part of the project, and we report through to the head office, which is in Manchester. And a lot of the collaboration is pulled through that way. So it's quite a large and complex structure, but you know it works. Yeah. The Australian Infrastructure Project Manager for the SKA. So that involves, as it sounds, it's the infrastructure for the low antenna array. So that involves the high performance computing building, which in itself is a unique facility. All of the roads, the power, the camp, water, those kinds of things actually enable the facility to exist. So the low antennas will be operating at incredibly low frequencies. It's going to be one of a kind, which means anything that can emit a radio signal, like your car clicker, for example, can actually blind the instrument. So the signals we're listening to are so faint that anything here on the ground will interfere with it. So that in itself becomes a challenge, because things, as you've identified, like the air conditioning, become a source of noise for the instrument, which in itself is a problem. So we're needing to design the facility. For example, the computer processing facility on site needs to be shielded so that we can get all of these signals into the building, but no signals get out. So we have a fully shielded radio facility to do that, which in itself is quite a unique piece of engineering. But that's one of many challenges on site around managing RFI. Cars going up and down the road, for example, is a source of RFI. So there'll be really specific operational requirements to work on and around the facility, which are all still very much in play at the moment that we're working through. So the attributes. I think the attributes element, so being a fearless leader, was one of the Oricon attributes that we really focus on diversity here, and that's not diversity through gender or race. It's diversity through thought. Bringing different approaches to every single project team. Because if you have a bunch of carbon copies, then you're going to get the same thing. So the attribute that was assigned to me was fearless through this quiz, which was kind of neat. And I have a mug that has fearless on it, which is kind of nice. I think when it comes to something like the SKA, it's down to the ambiguity of the project itself, because we're inventing something new, and that in itself requires courage to make decisions in absence of having necessarily those boundaries to run within, which in itself is a challenge. And I think it's For me, it's I've been involved with this program for so long, and given we are multiple teams working towards the same end goal, which in itself is really unique. And I guess I'm not afraid to make sure that that's where we're all working towards. It's a common goal.
Mm.
And I'm actually okay with working with ambiguity because we still know what the end point's going to be. If we have to take multiple twists and turns to get there, then that's okay.
Yeah.
So as far as the two being related, I guess I'm comfortable doing it. I guess being comfortable with ambiguity in this context is okay with me.
Mm.
I think being fearless doesn't necessarily mean being a risk taker. I think it just, for me, it means not being afraid of there being risk, I guess. As far as a philosophy goes, I think always know where your exits are. Same as when you're on an airplane.
Yeah.
It's always a risk. It doesn't necessarily have to be scary, but you need to understand what your position is. So understanding, your worst case scenario, know where your exits are, what are you going to do? I think for me it's usually as simple as that. And not all risk is bad. Some risk also equals an opportunity. So it's understanding that, which way you want to look at it. It doesn't have to be glass half empty. So I think it does definitely differ. It differs. There's risk to the business, and there's risk to the project, and there's risk to the client. It depends, for my opinion, what is the client willing to tolerate and what is the business willing to tolerate, and then what does the contract say, of course. So contractual risk in itself is something that I think is certainly in WA has been, we do tend to fight around contracts a lot, but I think as we start to see the introduction of contracting models more like NEC or NEC4 as it is now, that's going to become less of an issue. It becomes more of a shared pain gain arrangement. So I think it really does depend on the appetite of the client and the appetite of your business as to where you're willing to draw the line. But ultimately, the focus should always be whatever the end product is. It shouldn't be about arguing over the contract. If that contract's coming out every day and you're saying, well, I'm not paying or not doing this because the contract says that, maybe it comes down to the relationship with the client first and foremost. It's who's willing to tolerate a certain level of risk, I guess. But no one wants to lose money. We're not charities, so we have to do what's sensible. But I like to do what's right first. That's a broad question.
Intentionally.
Problem solving. Well, as it relates to project management, I feel one of the roles that we have as project managers is to foresee and define problems that the client might not even know they have. That in itself is a skill. It doesn't necessarily have to be presented as a negative thing, but having that foresight, again, it goes back to the risk element as well. If you can have some level of foresight as to what could go wrong, and if that starts to manifest, you've already got some kind of plan about what you might do. Mistakes happen. Often human mistakes are a thing, and we can spend time getting upset at the people that made those mistakes, or we can go about solving them. But again, focusing on the outcome that you've always been aimed at first and foremost has to be, from in my opinion anyway, has to be the first thing that you focus on. Fix it first. Cost it, understand it. How does that impact on the remainder of your time, your budget? But the focus is still and always should be the outcome of the project. So I think if you give clients early warning as well, never hide a problem. I think always be upfront, and honesty will get you a long way, I think, with building that trust. Like many, we've all had personal struggle. I think the first one that comes to mind would be on a business trip. It's not even a good story, but in 2015 I snapped a ligament in my knee, and I wish I had a cool story to go with that, but it's not. I fell off a bike. It wasn't even a proper bike. It was a street bike. Anyway, I fell off and I completely snapped the ligament in my knee. It's complete separation. And I went to multiple specialists, and I had a choice. I could have gone into a leg cast or be on crutches, or the other option was keep my quads strong, which is what I did. And
what's involved with keeping your quads strong?
well, a lot of gym work, changing the way I trained and existed, changing the way I lift things, the way I sit down, the way I walk. You know, a lot of gym work, and I still went on the following year to become a dual national champion with my training. So I was heavily compromised. Did it anyway. You've got to find a way, right?
Absolutely.
If you have a problem, find a solution and
make it happen.
Focus on the end goal. So
wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Wow. And you're okay now?
I'm getting there.
Yeah.
So it's still one of those things. As you get older, just a lot of physio, and you have to take care of yourself. You get one body, so you need to look out for it.
Absolutely.
I think when you first start out as a project manager, we spend a lot of time focusing on the rules. We get trained in specific things about now do this, must do that. And I think it's not until you've got a couple of years under your belt you start to realise that might not be a linear thing or a structured thing, and that's actually okay. But first and foremost, I think be authentic, because sometimes project management, sort of being relatively new in the scheme of things, as being considered a professional career, we were seen as a little bit stilted, a little bit immobile. But be authentic and be honest, I think, are those two things. So being more relaxed around your style will come in time, and that's just time in the saddle. But if you can do anything, it's be okay with being yourself. I think that's really important. It adds that layer of authenticity, which in itself builds trust, and you need trust to do a good job. I think it's starting to matter less and less now. I know in the corporate world there's plenty of businesses that are focusing on diversity and even gender targets. We at Oricon are really big on diversity, but as I said, we try and shift that mindset away from just gender or race, religion, any of those things. It's what you bring to the table. So I think if we keep focusing on gender as a target, with all good intents and purposes, sometimes it can actually take away from the really strong message of just being a woman in the role. Let it remain unsaid. And I think we are moving more towards that, which is really nice. I think the swing towards gender targets, I think, has been necessary because we needed to draw attention to it. But there's a pendulum swing which I feel like is starting to come back towards the centre now, which is nice, and it should and is, I think, starting to happen more naturally. But as we empower more young women through that school age, I think it's really important, and through high school. So in time, I think it will just self-select, I guess. So to me, I'm just someone doing their job, and I'm doing this job because I'm the best person for the job. And I'm actually okay with that. I just happen to be a woman. I'm lucky me. Yeah. It's difficult for me to nominate one leadership moment. It's actually a really tough question. I think if I were to frame it in different elements of individuals that I admire, it'd be the likes of, Barack Obama, connecting with a nation, with people, with humility, but honesty. He was always, you felt that he was genuine, and he showed his emotion. And even Theresa May, I mean, good grief, what a tough gig. But she still, regardless of whether she was successful or not, she carried herself with dignity. Julie Bishop is another example of a woman who, just leaves it unsaid but carries herself with dignity and makes statements in ways that didn't require words. So I think for me it's the traits of dignity, humility and honesty, I think, are ones that I really admire. And you can see that through multiple people and times in history, I think. When I think about some of the young athletes that I coach, which in itself is mentoring as well, preparing for any competition requires an ability to be still, and it also requires a lot of self-belief. And dealing with, especially the young girls, that really critical age of, the ages of 14 through 17, that's the worst for a young girl's confidence.
Yeah.
So having those moments or those times where you can see that they're, getting prepared for competition or on race day, and, they're like deer in headlights. And being able to recenter someone and bring them back into the moment, and watch them go out and achieve something that they didn't know they could do, because they'd already given themselves a story that they were not going to do a good job, or they might even fail. But watching them go out and try anyway, and coming back in and look on their faces, that's really special for me. Yeah, really important. Well, there's obvious ones like healthcare. I think probably quality of life. Even something like going to even some of our well-established and affluent cousins, like London, for example. Fantastic city, bustling and huge economy, and but the things like the living conditions. I'm not sure if you've ever lived there, but we cram people on top of each other, and that's normal. That's their normal. And we come out here with our 4x2 and our entertaining area and all sorts of, we need more room to have more stuff, So I think our environment and our living conditions are really privileged. It's I know it's difficult to own a house here. It's difficult to buy in and all of those things, but our quality of life, I think, is really unique and really special. And sometimes it's not until you go somewhere else that you get a new appreciation for that. Even in the civilized economies, and that becomes even more what's the word I'm looking for? Obvious, I guess, in some of our poorer cousins. Some Asian countries like Cambodia, for example, the living conditions they live in there, and you come home from something like that, you realise how blessed we are.